One of the clearest signs of anxious attachment is this. You do not actually feel calm when the relationship is healthy. You feel calm when the person is reachable. That is a very different thing. Calm should come from trust, consistency, and knowing where you stand. But in anxious attachment, calm often comes from access. They replied, they answered, they came back, they watched your story, they picked up the phone, they sounded warm, they are still there. And for a moment, your whole body softens. That is what this episode is about. Why anxious attachment can make access feel like safety. Why that calm disappears so fast. And why a person can spend months or years confusing contact with real security. If this kind of clarity helps your nervous system settle, subscribe. PsychBond is a daily decoder for psychology, relationships, and avoidant and anxious attachment patterns, so you stop guessing. This pattern is easy to miss because it feels so normal when you are inside it. You think you are reacting to love. You think you are reacting to closeness. You think you are reacting to the fact that this person matters. But a lot of the time, what you are really reacting to is the temporary end of uncertainty. They text back, and your chest loosens. They stop sounding distant, and your mind gets quiet. They come toward you after pulling away, and suddenly food tastes normal again. The room feels lighter, and you can think about something other than them for 5 minutes. That is not nothing, but it is not the same as real peace. It is relief. And relief can feel so good that it gets mistaken for love, progress, reassurance, or proof that the bond is okay. This is the heart of the pattern. In anxious attachment, access often works like a nervous system drug. It does not solve the deeper fear. It just lowers it for a moment. Then the fear comes back, and you need access again. That is why this can feel so humiliating when you finally see it clearly. You realize you were not calming down because the relationship became safer. You were calming down because the person came back into reach. You were not settling because trust had grown. You were settling because the threat of immediate loss had dropped for a minute. That is a brutal difference, because it means your nervous system may be getting attached to contact itself, not to what the contact is actually building. This usually starts long before the current relationship. Somewhere earlier, your body learned that connection was unstable. Love could feel good one day and shaky the next. Warmth could arrive and disappear without warning. The person you wanted could be close, then hard to read, then suddenly distant. So your system became watchful. It started tracking availability. It started treating signs of contact as signs of survival. If they are here, I can breathe. If they are warm, I can rest. If they answer, I am okay. If they pull away, something is wrong. That wiring does not vanish just because you are older now. It comes into adult relationships with you. And if the person you are attached to is inconsistent, avoidant, hot and cold, emotionally unclear, or hard to pin down, that old system lights up hard. That is why anxious attachment can feel so physical. This is not only about thoughts, it is about body states. 1 minute you are spiraling, checking, reading into everything, feeling sick, heavy, abandoned, almost ashamed of how much this affects you. Then they reply, and the panic drops. Nothing real may be resolved. The relationship may still be unstable. They may not have explained anything. They may not have apologized. They may not even be acting differently in any lasting way. But because access was restored, your body acts like danger left the room. That is why people stay in these loops for so long. The relief is real. The problem is that the relief is borrowed. It depends on whether the person is available in that moment. So instead of building inner stability, the relationship starts training you to regulate through them. Their tone becomes your peace. Their response time becomes your peace. Their attention becomes your peace. Their presence becomes your peace. That is too much power to hand another person, especially someone who is not steady enough to hold it well. And the worst part is that anxious attachment can make that dependency feel like love. It can feel romantic. It can feel deep. It can feel like this person just matters more than anyone else. But if your calm rises and falls entirely on whether you still have access, that is not only love. That is nervous system dependence. Another reason this pattern is so hard to break is that access can look like progress even when nothing important changed. A person texts you after going quiet. They come back after pulling away. They reach out after a stretch of distance. They give you warmth after making you panic. And because the contact feels so relieving, the mind starts turning it into meaning. Maybe they miss me. Maybe they finally get it. Maybe this is the turning point. Maybe now we are okay. But being reachable is not the same as being reliable. A reply is not the same as repair. Warmth is not the same as steadiness. Access is not the same as trust. This is where a lot of anxious people get lost. They keep reading short-term contact as long-term safety. They keep thinking the bond is getting better because the distress eased for a few hours. But what matters is not only whether they came back. What matters is what keeps happening over time. Does the relationship become calmer to live inside? Do you have to guess less? Do you feel more secure on ordinary days? Do you stop scanning for signs? Or do you keep getting these little bursts of contact that lower the fear while the deeper instability stays the same? That is the question. Because a lot of people are not addicted to love. They are addicted to the relief that comes when access returns. That is what makes these bonds so sticky. They do not keep you trapped with constant pain. They keep you trapped with swings. Panic, then relief. Distance, then contact. Fear, then softness. The drop and the rescue. The crash and the text. The silence and the return. And every time relief comes after distress, the nervous system learns the same lesson again. Stay focused here. Keep watching. Keep waiting. Keep hoping. The next hit of calm may be right around the corner. That is why anxious attachment can make a relationship feel impossible to leave, even when you know it is hurting you. You are not only attached to the person, you are attached to the cycle. You are attached to the moment the body finally softens again. This is why people often say things like, "I know this is not healthy, but I just need to hear from them." Or, "I know we did not fix anything, but I feel so much better now that they texted." Or, "I know this keeps happening, but when they are warm, it feels so real." All of that makes sense. That is exactly how the pattern works. But the real danger is this. If you only feel calm when you have access, then access starts controlling your whole life. You stop measuring the relationship by its actual quality and start measuring it by whether the channel is open. Are we talking? Are they near? Are they engaged? Are they responding? Are they watching? Are they still there? The bar gets lower and lower. Instead of asking, "Is this relationship making me feel secure?" you start asking, "Am I still inside it?" Instead of asking, "Is this healthy?" you start asking, "Do I still have a line to them?" The emotional standard shrinks from peace to proximity. That is a painful downgrade. Care becomes availability. Love becomes responsiveness. Safety becomes access. That is what anxious attachment does when it gets strong enough. It shrinks your definition of security down to simple reachability. That is why people can feel so grateful for so little. They are not only reacting emotionally, they are reacting like someone who has been underwater and finally got one breath. Of course, that breath feels big. The question is whether you are being given a life you can breathe in, or whether you are surviving on occasional air. Another thing access does in anxious attachment is create a false sense of closeness. You may feel close because you are talking again. You may feel connected because the person is warm tonight. You may feel hopeful because the tension dropped. But closeness that exists only when the person is immediately present is fragile. Real closeness survives ordinary distance. It survives a few hours, a few days, a busy period, a hard conversation, a shift in mood, because the base underneath is still steady. If your sense of closeness collapses every time access weakens, then the relationship is not creating deep safety. It is creating emotional dependence on immediate contact. That is why anxious attachment can feel so embarrassing. You may know you are overreacting a little. You may know a slower reply should not wreck your nervous system. You may know it should not matter this much whether they watched your story or sounded a bit colder. But your body does not care what should happen. It is reacting to the system it has learned. Access equals relief. No access equals danger. That is the loop. And until you see it clearly, you will keep giving the relationship credit for calming you when all it really did was stop scaring you for a minute. This pattern also changes how you measure care. Instead of asking, "Does this person show up steadily, communicate clearly, and make my life feel calmer over time?" you start asking, "Did they come back? Did they answer? Did they respond warmly? Did they notice I was upset? Did they reopen the line?" That is a very painful downgrade, and it creates an invisible kind of self-betrayal. You start cooperating with a lower standard because your body is so desperate for relief. You let the person back into emotional reach before anything real changed. You stop asking for clarity because the return itself feels like enough for the moment. You call the panic dropping a sign that the bond is healing. But the panic dropped because access returned. That is different. Another hard truth is that if you feel calm only when you have access, then you probably do not trust the relationship. You trust contact. That can be painful to admit because it means the bond may feel stronger than it actually is. You may feel deeply attached, deeply affected, deeply invested, and still not have basic trust. That split is what exhausts people. They feel emotionally close, but they do not feel safe. They feel drawn in, but they do not feel settled. They feel relieved when the person is there, but not secure enough to stay calm when the person is simply living their life. That is why the word access matters so much here. Access is not love. Access is not security. Access is not proof that the relationship is healthy. Access is just access. And if access is the only thing keeping you calm, then the work is not only about the person. It is about rebuilding an inner life that does not rise and fall entirely with whether one person is available right now. That is where healing starts. Not with pretending you do not care, not with shaming yourself for feeling too much, but with telling the truth about what your body has started depending on. Healing anxious attachment means learning to tell the difference between relief and real peace. Relief says, they texted back, now I can breathe. Peace says, even when we are not in constant contact, I still know where I stand. Relief says, they are here again, maybe everything is okay. Peace says, whether we are talking this minute or not, the relationship still feels steady. Relief is momentary. Peace is deeper. Relief depends on access. Peace depends on trust. That distinction changes everything. Once you see it, you stop asking only whether the person came back. You start asking what actually changed in the bond. Once you see it, you stop treating every warm moment like a full answer. You start asking whether the relationship itself is becoming easier to live inside. Once you see it, you can finally ask the question that breaks the pattern open. If I only feel calm when I have access, what happens to me the second access is gone? That question matters because it shows you the cost. The cost is that your nervous system is being run by somebody else's availability. That is not where anyone wants to live. And yet, many people live there for years because they keep calling that calm love. The goal is not to become cold. The goal is not to stop caring. The goal is to stop needing access as the price of emotional survival. The goal is to build a life where your body does not collapse every time the line goes quiet, where you can care deeply without becoming dependent on constant proof, where love is not measured by reachability alone. That is the real shift. Not from caring to not caring. From panic relief to real stability. From access as safety to trust as safety. From living at the mercy of another person's availability to finally being able to stay with yourself even when the line is not lit up. But that change does not happen just because you understand the idea once. It happens when you start interrupting the pattern in real life. You stop checking for signs every 10 minutes. You stop treating each reply like a verdict on your worth. You stop letting one person's tone decide whether your day is salvageable. You stop making immediate access the thing that tells you whether you are safe. Those are small moves, but they matter because they teach the body a new rule. My survival is not sitting in their inbox. My calm is not sitting in their response time. My worth is not sitting in their current level of availability. That is the work. It is not flashy. It is often boring. But boring is good here. Boring means your body is no longer being whipped around by every shift in access. Another part of healing is learning how to sit through the first wave of panic without immediately trying to fix it through contact. That is hard. That is where most people cave. Not because they are weak, because the discomfort feels urgent and personal. The mind says, just text, just check, just get one sign, just make sure everything is okay. But every time you solve the panic only by getting access again, the loop gets stronger. That is why people have to start building other ways of coming back to themselves. Slowing the body, naming what is happening, reminding themselves that fear is not proof. Looking at the actual pattern instead of the current silence. Asking, what has this relationship consistently given me? Not, What do I want this one moment to mean? Those moves are powerful because they interrupt the old lesson. They stop teaching the body that the only path to calm is through the other person. They start teaching the body that I can survive uncertainty without collapsing into pursuit. And once that lesson starts sinking in, the whole relationship looks different. The person may still matter. You may still care. But they stop feeling like the only door back to calm. Another piece of this pattern is that it makes distance feel louder than everything else in your life. You can be at work, with friends, eating dinner, trying to sleep, and some part of your attention is still parked on whether the person is there. Not physically there, psychologically there. Reachable, available, open. That divided attention is one of the clearest costs of anxious attachment. Your life starts happening around the relationship instead of the relationship fitting into your life. You are not fully in your day because some part of you is still listening for movement from them. That is not romance. That is vigilance. And vigilance gets exhausting when it becomes your normal. This is also why access can feel more powerful than actual compatibility. A person can be wrong for your nervous system in 10 different ways. But if they are the person who ends your panic when they come back, you can start feeling more bonded to that relief than to what the relationship is actually like. You can start calling the person special because they can calm what they also trigger. That is one of the most painful loops in anxious attachment. The same person becomes both the source of distress and the source of temporary relief. Once that happens, it gets very hard to judge the bond clearly because every return feels like proof that you need them, when really, it may just be proof that they can stop the reaction they helped create. Another hard thing to admit is that when you only feel calm with access, you can start cooperating with things that are bad for you just to keep the line open. You overlook disrespect because at least the channel is not closed. You accept vagueness because at least they are still talking. You settle for half answers because at least they answered at all. You call inconsistency progress because the alternative feels like silence. That is how anxious attachment starts bargaining with reality. Not because you do not know better, because your body is trying to keep the source of relief close, even when the same source is keeping you unstable. Another important part of this pattern is that it can make the person on the other side look more powerful than they really are. They text, and your whole inner world changes. They go quiet, and your whole inner world changes. They act warm, and hope floods in. They act vague, and everything crashes. From the outside, that can make it look like they have some extraordinary hold over you. But a lot of the time, what you are looking at is not their power. It is your nervous system's dependence on contact as proof of safety. That matters because if you misread the problem, you will chase the wrong solution. You will think, I just need them to be more reassuring. But if your body has already fused calm with contact, even a more reassuring version of the same dynamic may still leave you dependent. The deeper work is learning how not to collapse the second access drops. This is also where boundaries get confusing for anxious people. A boundary can feel like danger if your body is still reading access as safety. You may know you need more space. You may know the dynamic is too consuming. You may know you need to step back. But if stepping back also means less access, your body may react like you are doing something terrible. That does not mean the boundary is wrong. It means your system has not yet learned how to separate distance from danger. Another thing that happens when access becomes safety is that you stop noticing how little else is holding the relationship up. As long as the line is open, you can tell yourself there is still something here. But open contact can hide a lot of emptiness. You can be in constant communication with somebody and still have no actual security. You can talk every day and still not know where you stand. You can have access and still have no peace. This is why access is such a weak substitute for real stability. It looks like something. It feels like something. But many people are living on conversation frequency instead of trust, on responsiveness instead of reliability, on presence instead of a bond that can withstand ordinary life. Another painful reality is that anxious attachment can make ordinary separation feel like proof of losing value. The person gets busy, and your body says, "I am slipping." They sound distracted, and your body says, "I matter less." They take longer than usual, and your body says, "Something changed." That is what makes this pattern so consuming. Every small shift becomes loaded because your sense of safety is sitting inside access. Another practical sign that access has become your main regulator is how much your sense of self changes when the person is available versus unavailable. When they are warm, you may feel attractive, chosen, hopeful, okay. When they go cold, you may feel foolish, forgotten, too much, or not enough. That swing tells you something very important. Your sense of self has become too exposed to their availability. And once self-worth gets tied to access, the relationship starts running deeper than simple liking or wanting. Now the person is not only somebody you want, they start feeling like somebody who decides how easy it is for you to live inside your own skin. That is why healing anxious attachment often feels like getting your own face back, your own rhythm, your own day, your own mind, your own worth. You stop borrowing yourself from someone else's availability. That is also why healing can feel strangely boring at first. A steadier life does not give you the same crash and rescue. A healthier bond does not make you wait all day for one text to decide whether you can breathe. Real safety is quieter. It does not flood you with relief because it is not creating constant panic first. And if your body got used to calm arriving only after fear, quiet stability can feel unfamiliar. That does not mean it is wrong. It means your system is learning a new language. Another useful question here is simple. What actually changes when they come back? Does your life become calmer in any lasting way, or does the fear just pause? Do you get more clarity, or only more contact? Do you trust them more, or do you just feel better because the line is open again? Those questions matter because they pull you out of the spell. They stop letting access pretend to be the same thing as a secure relationship. That is what healing anxious attachment really starts to look like. It is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is very practical. You stop calling relief peace. You stop calling access security. You stop treating every reply like proof that the whole relationship is okay. And slowly, your body learns a new lesson. Contact can be nice. Contact can matter. Contact can feel good. But my life does not have to rise and fall with whether I still have it right this second. That is freedom. And that is the thing anxious attachment is really starving for, even when it thinks it is starving for the person. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.